welcome. I'm Kamla. My guest today is filmmaker Jason Sussberg. He is one of the directors of a new documentary called Bill Nye, the Science Guy. Here's a trailer from the film, and then our interview with Jason Sussberg.
Please join me in welcoming America's favorite scientist, Bill Nye, the Science Guy.
Just the start of things. We're getting things wrapped up.
It was really the 1990s. I wanted to make young people excited about science again.
Science!
I studied at Cornell University. I decided to take astronomy from this famous professor, Carl Sagan. He said kids resonate to science, and I really embraced that.
A lot of people of my generation attribute their interest and love of science to Bill Nye.
You would just see the TV cart come in and then just hear, Bill, Bill, Bill.
The Science Guy show contained the science that excited Bill. And you, the viewer, can't help but be just as excited as the instructor.
I was asked to talk about selfie fatigue. Here we go. Go, whoa! I'm pretty sure it shortens your life. Science Guy show is over. I got to move on to something bigger. Nowadays, I'm talking to adults, and I'm not mincing words. Climate is changing. It's our fault. We got to get to work on this. This is where we see the smoking gun.
This is raising sea level. This is drowning Miami eventually.
Bill successfully transitioned from Bill Nye, the Science Guy for kids, to the science statesman.
We're going to space!
Rocket science.
That's the bottle I'm drinking with Bill.
Mission control.
Go ahead, Bill Nye.
I would just like to say the following thing.
Woohoo! We are, dare I say it, changing the world!
Joe Bastardi challenged me to a debate. You agree with that?
Bill, you don't want to go here.
Currently, Joe Bastardi is a climate denier. If Joe changed his mind, that could be very influential.
I'm not trying to save the world.
Bill Nye himself is not a scientist.
I don't have a PhD. I talk to the experts and hold the evidence in my hands. These people who are denying science, and especially denying climate change, we just can't have this. If we raise a generation of kids that can't think critically, we are headed for trouble. My dad's big thing was leave the world better than you found it. My drive to do all this is from my parents. I try to be worthy of them.
So, Jason, welcome to San Francisco.
Thank you.
Well, this is your hometown.
Every morning I'm welcome to San Francisco.
But you grew up in Grass Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Closer to the border.
Yeah, it was a county in Northern California called Nevada County. It was a very small Sierra mountain town. It was actually a very great place to be a kid, running around in the woods, playing in rivers, but also we had a very dynamic arts scene. So lots of theater, filmmaking, music. It was a great place to grow up.
Okay, so you're one of the directors and you did the sound for this new documentary called Bill Nye, Science Guy, and you raised over $850,000 on Kickstarter, I think one of the largest fundraisers on Kickstarter. And then in your Kickstarter note, you had a quote from Carl Sagan, somewhere something as incredible as waiting to be known. And that incredible waiting to be known person in this case is Bill Nye. How did he get the permission to be up close and personal with Bill Nye, the Science Guy?
I mean, the unsexy answer to this is we emailed him. That's what happened.
How did you email him? Who did you email?
We found everybody. You can find pretty much, if you have journalism chops, or if you're an investigator, or if you're just a good online stalker, you can pretty much get a hold of anybody. And so in our case, we emailed Bill's agent. And
do you have IMBD membership?
No. We just went on, Bill Nye agent.
Oh, okay.
On Google. And we found his agent's contact information and we emailed her. And she said, we had made a documentary called The Immortalist, which had a festival run in 2014 and opened in theaters and had a small amount of success. So we weren't nobody, but we still, it's hard to get a hold of somebody as a high profile person as Bill Nye. And she wrote us back and said, wait, who are you with? And we're like, nobody. We're with nobody. We're independent.
You really said that?
Oh, yeah, because we were independent. And she said, okay, well, I can provide 1 hour over the weekend for an interview.
Why did she give you that time?
I'm not sure. We were persistent. I guess we were persistent.
So you emailed her multiple times?
Yeah, exactly. And then so she said, well, we can make space for 1 hour. And my response was, we were thinking more like 2 years immersed in his life over 1,000 years or 1,000 hours. And her response was like, wait, what? What do you guys want to do? And we ended up getting a meeting with Bill and his agent in San Francisco when Bill was passing through here. And we pitched him on the story of his life, his legacy, and his advocacy to fight anti-science. And he liked our pitch, and the rest was history.
Why did he like your pitch?
Bill is somebody who for a long time was trying to find his second act in life. He, had done this amazing show in the 90s and was sort of chipping away at his career, was on various shows on National Geographic, but he didn't really, this was 2014, he hadn't really broken through again. He was a sort of a nostalgic figure from the 90s, but he wasn't a contemporary person. And he saw in this country this terrible slide in sort of enthusiasm for science. And he saw all the climate denial that was happening and, belief in creationism. And so he wanted to, sound the alarms about this growing movement. And we, convinced him that he has this platform, and he has this science advocacy. And if he did a documentary with us, we could help, elevate this profile and give him a platform for him to share his thoughts.
But I'm still curious to know what was that one line or one thought that got him hooked, because you said we are nobody to the agent, right? So I'm curious because maybe there are others who may want to learn from your experience.
Well, the real story is, we happened to make this film called The Immortalists about these people working on life extension. And we caught the eye of this producer in LA. His name is Seth Gordon, and he's done some amazing documentaries. Gleason, amazing film.
But wasn't he also part of the Horrible Bosses? And
yeah, exactly. He has, Seth has a very diverse career, Hollywood and documentary narratives, but his docs are outstanding. And so is all of his work is amazing, but he's really kind of a legendary documentary filmmaker. And he saw The Immortalists and liked it and said, how can I help you guys? And so we told him. He
just came out and said, how can I help you?
Oh, well, it's a little bit longer of a story, but he also worked with a couple of our producers on our film on a different project. And he saw The Immortalists, and they had collaborated on a different project. And so he knew we wanted to make this film on Bill Nye. And he said, okay, let me see what I can do. We can try to, partner together and make this movie together. And
so you already had Seth Gordon's backing in a way when you went to speak with Bill Nye.
So yeah, we had, at that point, Seth had agreed to join the project.
So there is the real story.
Yeah.
So it was not like you were nobody. You already had the backing of a well-known producer.
Yeah, exactly.
And so Bill Nye was looking to see what he could do next.
Exactly.
And so your timing was right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you'd prepared for it.
We did a lot of homework. We researched his whole life. We were trying to figure out what made him tick.
What made him tick?
Well, he really is genuinely concerned about science literacy in this country. He did the show because he was worried about our sliding literacy in science, and I think he saw this entire generation that he helped raise, these millennials, who I'm one of them, David is one of them. He saw the enthusiasm that these kids had for science. And so we knew that he had tapped into this the surge of excitement with millennials in science education. And our pitch was that we could continue that message now that these kids are adults. And now that they're of voting age, and now that they're becoming scientists and doctors and engineers, now is the time for his reemergence. He really enjoyed the idea that he could continue making a difference like he did in the 90s.
Okay, and you grew up watching his...
Absolutely. I think one of the reasons, no doubt, one of the influences that I had in being a filmmaker is watching Bill Nye when I was a kid, for two reasons. One, the show was just surreal. From like an aesthetic point of view, it was reminding me a lot of a variety show like Pee-wee's Playhouse, and it was just an amazingly hilarious, fun, cool conceptual show. And then two, I was always interested in science and the natural world, environmentalism, and so when I went into film school, I was reflective of why I was interested in this space, and Bill Nye is one of those reasons.
And did you ever ask him about the impact or how Back to the Future gave Bill Nye his break?
So that's a part of his story. Yeah, he was on. He voiced a character in the cartoon, Back to the Future. I have never, even during the research, we did tons of research, finding everything that Bill was in, and I haven't seen one of those shows, the Back to the Future show.
Okay.
But he was a working L.A. actor, and so he took a gig, and that was one of the one of his starts. He actually started originally on sketch comedy, on this sketch comedy show in Seattle called Almost Live. So his career was vast and varied, and we just touched the surface in the movie because we weren't really making the definitive biographical everything about Bill Nye. We were making it about contemporary Bill and the mission he was on. So as far as Back to the Future, that wasn't really a part of our story.
No, but it is also a portrait of the man behind the blue coat, as one of your taglines says.
Yeah.
Or maybe somebody commented on that, because we get to see Bill Nye as a young kid, the influence of his parents, and the influence of his mother, So how did he open up to you? Because you used a very interesting tool or device. You didn't ask those questions directly, but you had somebody who was majoring in neuroscience ask him questions about his childhood and parents. Why did you resort to that kind of a device?
Right. Well, Bill was very forthcoming about his childhood and his life, and he was very reflective of his parents and the role that his parents played in his development. When he told us that he was a part of this study, it's a study with a neuroscientist whose name is Dr. Heather Berlin, and she's studying the effect of fame on the brain and celebrity on the brain. And Bill was one of her test cases. And Bill mentioned this, I think in an email to us, was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna meet my friend Heather. She made me do this personality test, and I was one of her subjects in the study. And at the time, I didn't think of it, but David, the other co-director, was like, my God, that's amazing, we should film this. And so we asked Heather, and Heather agreed, and we asked Bill, and they were both very welcoming to the idea that we could film sort of her crack open Bill's brain and show her, and then by proxy show us. And it felt like an organic way to get into this stuff. It's not like we couldn't have done that, but it felt like this opportunity where we could actually have someone else's voice in the film and make it this, cinema verite, observational scene of the two of them, which just presented a more interesting way to discover the information.
So did Bill Nye then do his Netflix series after he started the documentary with you?
Yeah, we started the documentary in late 2014, and Bill didn't start filming, I believe, on the Netflix show until, I don't actually remember the timeline, I think it was like late 2015, so it was over a year after we were filming.
Okay, so did you ever see him do that show?
We were aware that it was happening, but it wasn't part of our story. We knew we wanted to focus on Bill and his mission to talk to deniers and creationists and to launch his solar sail, which was this sail that Carl Sagan and his organization, the Planetary Society, was launching. That was our story. The Netflix show happened concurrently, but it was probably a little too meta. If we showed the filming of a show, it wasn't really our story.
Okay, got you. So one of the things that really surprised me was how accessible Nye is to his audience, whether they're teachers or kids. And you had, and you did this thing on selfies. First, let's take a look at the selfies, and I'll come back to you with a question. So here's a clip of Bill Nye taking selfies.
People still watch Bill Nye the Science Guy in school. Teachers showed it in class for years and years.
Greetings, greetings! It's great to see you all, and I'm very happy that, as I understand it, I've been teaching a lot of your classes this year. Here we go. Yeah. Oh, well, there it was. I heard it. Whoa, whoa.
One more, Bill. Thank you.
Right. Here we go. Hey.
Thank you.
Cool. Hey, cool. Ah, hey, blah. Go, go, go. Whoa.
3, 2.
You gotta, yeah. You don't need a countdown. Just go for it. You gotta reach out. You gotta go. You gotta turn it around. Catch up.
All right.
How hard can it be? I'm not sprinting, but reach out, man. So you're too close. I was asked to talk about selfie fatigue, and I haven't. I'm pretty sure it shortens your life.
So that was a clip of Bill Nye and Selfies. Who came up with the idea of incorporating that in your film?
It's, I mean, it's impossible to walk down the street with Bill and not have him be mobbed by people who say, Bill, I'm a scientist because of you. I'm an engineer because of you. I'm a doctor because of your show. That was just a part of the fabric of the documentary. And when we went to the filming of it, and we basically cut out all of the fandom throughout the whole film because our film was this story of a man trying to make a difference with science. And right now we're in our country, science is on defense. And so we didn't want to have this sunny portrait of a celebrity being mobbed by people throughout the documentary. But there was one scene where he goes to the National Science Teachers Convention, and these are his people. These are the people who just love Bill. They're science teachers. And so when we were walking through the showroom, it was Beatlemania. It was pandemonium. He'd walk onto the showroom. He got no break. People came up and shoved their camera in his face. And so when we were editing the footage, there was no way to edit around it.
So you had
they were just so present. And you know, Bill's very generous and kind when it comes to engaging his fans. He listens to them, he takes their photos, but it's exhausting for him, and it's exhausting for us. You know, just being around that is insane. And so you could see it wear on him. And in the film, he gets in the elevator, elevator doors shut, and he just feels exhausted. And that's something that the audience felt, and we felt as filmmakers, and so we included it. And as a bit of levity in a film that's otherwise not very light.
Oh, yeah. So the film is a combination of showing the man, the human behind the name Bill Nye, and also his mission, like you have pointed out, you know, educating people on science. And it's now the older crowd that he's targeting. And so two people that were there in this film touch upon the two themes that you talked about, that is the climate deniers and those who are creationists. How did you get the permission to tape that interview, that dialogue between Ken Ham and Bill Nye?
Yeah.
Tell us about Ken Ham.
Okay, so Ken Ham is the I guess you can call him the CEO, but he's also the main pastor of this organization called Answers in Genesis. And it's the leading creationist organization in America. And these are devout, fundamentalist Christians. And Bill had done this debate in February of 2014 with Ken Ham about whether or not evolution is true and whether or not creationism is a viable way to explain the origin of species. And Bill debated him, and he's a very passionate believer in his point of view, and Bill was trying to point out that, you know, science says otherwise, that you can have faith in God and believe in science. Those things are not oppositional. And, you know, we showed that in the film. And then later on, about a year or so after the debate, actually more like 15 months after the debate, there was the opening of this amusement park, a biblical amusement park that's called...
In northern Kentucky.
In northern Kentucky, called the Ark Encounter. And we knew it was opening, and we followed the story. Ken Ham is Bill's main adversary, of one of the two adversaries in the film. And we reached out to Ken's people and asked for permission to film there, and they initially said, no, we don't, of course we would never let you film here. And then I think they realized, this is my opinion, they realized that this could be a very big publicity thing for them. So they invited Bill to come tour the Ark. And Bill said, okay, I'll do that, but only so as long as the filmmakers who are making this documentary about me can come along. And at first they said, maybe, and then that turned into, yes, okay, we'll let you come tour the Ark. if the filmmakers come along. But they clearly wanted to show photos of Bill. They wanted to capture video of Bill. They use him as a big fundraising tool.
And that's what it turned out to be, right? Didn't they raise a lot of fund after that?
Well, it's hard to say where the money came from, but there was this gap of funding that they needed to build the arc. And then the waning days of the campaign, after Bill debated Ken Ham, there was a surge of money. And so who knows what that surge accounts for? But a lot of people that we spoke to, a lot of critics of Bill's decision to debate Ken Ham, they point to the debate as one of the reasons that some of the money came through.
The second person that you show in the film is a trained meteorologist, Mr. Bastardi from Philadelphia?
He's from State College, Pennsylvania.
Okay, State and how did that come about? Because his son, I think, is a fan of Bill Nye?
Yeah, that's right. So Bill had done this TV debate on the O'Reilly Factor back when O'Reilly was still on the air before his sexual harassment allegations on Fox News. And Bill had debated Joe Bastardi in this segment. And after that, Bastardi and Bill would engage in little online spats. Bastardi would write these blog posts, and Bill would, record these messages in response. And one thing escalated to another, and Joe challenged Bill to make a prediction about whether or not climate is changing. And Bill's response was, look, I'm going to be in State College. I'm going to be speaking with this meteorologist and climatologist at State College, Pennsylvania. I think Penn State is the name of the university. And Bill invited Joe to come talk. And Bill, Joe then responded by offering a wine summit with Bill to discuss whether or not humans are in charge of, raising temperatures and climate change. And we were simply there as participants and observers. And Bill, I think gracefully answered all of Joe's questions and tried to really get to the bottom of why Joe believed what he believed. But Joe is a very great meteorologist. He is a trained meteorologist, and he works for this organization called Weather Bell, and he is a long-term forecaster, and Joe nails his forecast. So he's not a bad meteorologist, he's a great meteorologist. He just happens to not agree with Bill that CO2 causes climate change. And it has to do with the fact that Joe, in my opinion, looks at the short term, and climate science look at deep time. They look at 10,000, 100,000, 1 million years as a reference. They just have a fundamentally different way of looking at things.
So two different approaches.
Yeah.
And that's what clashed. That was the clash.
Yes, and I think there's a little bit of ideology. I think Joe is ideologically a person who thinks that regulations are bad and that it could crash the American economy if we implement things to stop climate change. And so there's a little bit of, it's hard to say what his motivations are. We tried to get to the bottom of it, but the film was really about Bill and trying to get him to engage these deniers. And so we didn't really give Joe the time that was necessary to really get to the bottom. Joe deserves his own movie. He's an amazing person.
And a bodybuilder.
And a bodybuilder, yes. He's a world champion bodybuilder for his age group. What about his son? Garrett Bastardi, who's Joe's son, is also a meteorology student at the same university that his dad was at. He is a millennial. He's 21 years old. He's taking the same classes that his father took, and he's in the training to be a meteorologist, following his father's footsteps. Yet he's a very big fan of Bill Nye, and Bill Nye was his childhood hero. So it was this very interesting dynamic between Garrett, who has to compare what he's going to do to his father and to Bill. So he was in this very interesting position of having to take sides. And the film is kind of ambiguous about what he decides to do. Yeah, that's what I was curious to know, where that ended. Now, what did you learn from making this film and hanging out with Bill Nye? I learned a lot. I mean, this was a 2-year journey filming with him, and then it's been 3 years since we started the project with post-production and this release, and so it's been an amazing journey. I think one of the things I learned is that everybody has a story to tell, and even if you think you know somebody, you don't really know them until you spend time with them and get to know what influenced them and why they are the way they are. In the case of Bill, we got to meet his family, we got to meet his therapist, we got to meet his friends. We really got a sense of who he was. And with Joe Bastardi, we also met his family and got to know deeply who he was. So I think one of the takeaways for me was that everybody has a story and there's a reason why people believe what they believe.
What about hard work and dedication? Did you learn anything about those two things that...
Yeah, I mean, he's an incredibly intelligent, passionate person who never stops, never turns off. And he's, I think, more than hard work and dedication, I think it's passion. You know, if you believe in something passionately enough, good things happen.
So I want to end with something that was very interesting and touching, and that is when you show Bill Nye going to see his the other members in his family who have passed away, and he talks about his parents, and he says, "My parents made me who I am," and he says, "and I try to be worthy of them." How did you come to film that? Because that's a part of Bill Nye that many of us don't know. That is the role that his parents, and parents do play a very important role.
His mom was a World War II code breaker who was trying to find Nazi code and break it when she was a researcher at Johns Hopkins University. And Bill's father was a prisoner of war. He was taken prisoner by the Japanese on Wake Island. And this had a big impact on him, on his growing up. Also, I think he saw in World War II, a bunch of people came together to fight a common enemy. And it was something that he uses to analogize what's going on with climate change. If we took climate change as seriously as Americans and Europe took the Nazis and Japanese imperialism, then we could change the world. And so I think Bill uses that as an analogy. We knew if we were going to tell this story of Bill, we needed to know his whole family and why he believes the way he believes. And so we took him to the cemetery where his parents were interned, and we had him just sort of think about them in a quiet space. And he visited there because his brother and him make the journey occasionally. Every time he's in DC, pay respects to his parents, and we just came along for the ride and sat him down on a bench and had him talk about it.
So Bill Nye's mission is to make science matter. And if you missed any of our shows, you can watch them on our YouTube channel. We'll be back again next week with another edition of our show. Until then, goodbye.